Sometimes love arrives like a thunderstorm on a clear summer day, sudden, overwhelming, and impossible to ignore. Sometimes it creeps in quiet as morning mist, so gentle you don't realize it's there until it's already changed everything. In 1883, in the dusty frontier town of Cedar Ridge, Montana Territory, Reverend Samuel Sam McKenna stood 6 feet 10 inches tall, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of every soul seeking salvation. His hands, scarred from years of carpentry, before his calling to preach, could craft a church pew or cradle a dying child with equal tenderness. Margaret Maggie O'Brien had been the town's schoolmarm for 15 years, watching other women marry and bear children while she remained alone with her books and her 36 carefully hidden years. When the corrupt territorial administrator threatened to close her school unless she found a husband to provide proper moral guidance, she knew her time had run out. "I'll make you a bargain, Reverend McKenna," she whispered that September evening as golden light slanted through the one-room schoolhouse windows. "Marry me, and I'll give you something no other woman in this territory can, a true partner who can read Latin, teach your children, and build a congregation from nothing but faith and determination." But could a wandering preacher with ghosts in his past ever truly settle down with a woman whose heart had been waiting 20 years to be claimed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first time I laid eyes on Samuel McKenna, he was standing in the doorway of Hutchinson's general store, so tall he had to duck his head to enter. His brown hair, streaked with premature silver at the temples, caught the late afternoon sunlight like burnished copper. But it was his eyes that stopped me, cold, deep green as Montana pine forests, holding depths of sorrow I recognized because I carried my own. "You must be the schoolmarm," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I'm Sam McKenna. I'll be holding services at your school until we can build a proper church." I stood there like a fool, chalk dust on my dark blue wool dress, my chestnut hair escaping its severe bun after a long day wrestling knowledge into reluctant young minds. At 36, I'd long since stopped primping for male attention, but something about this gentle giant made me acutely aware of my appearance. "Miss O'Brien," I managed, extending my hand. When his massive palm engulfed mine, calloused and warm, I felt a jolt of electricity I'd read about in novels but never experienced. "The school is yours on Sundays, of course. Though I should warn you, our congregation consists mainly of miners, ranchers, and their families. Not much given to fancy theology." His smile transformed his stern features completely. "Good, neither am I." That was Tuesday. By Friday, I knew I was in trouble. Sam McKenna wasn't like the circuit preachers who'd come through Cedar Ridge before, pompous men who preached hellfire while eyeing the unmarried women like vultures. Sam worked alongside the men building the new church, his giant frame moving with surprising grace as he measured and cut lumber with the precision of a master craftsman. He ate meals with families regardless of their station, listened to children's problems with the same attention he gave adults, and never once made me feel like a withered spinster past her prime. "You've got the finest collection of books I've seen this side of Denver," he told me that Friday evening, running his finger along the spines of my precious volumes. Chaucer, Shakespeare, Dickens, even some Greek philosophy. Heat crept up my neck. Most folks think they're unsuitable for a woman, especially Chaucer. Most folks are fools. His green eyes met mine. "Learning is a gift from God, Miss O'Brien. Hiding it would be a sin." That's when I knew. This was the man I'd been waiting for, without even realizing I'd been waiting. But my revelation came at the worst possible time. Chester Blackwood, the territorial administrator appointed by friends in Washington, had arrived in Cedar Ridge 3 days earlier with his perfectly waxed mustache, his Eastern suits, and his plans to civilize our rough frontier community. He'd already informed Mayor Williams that he intended to shut down the school unless proper Christian leadership could be established. "What he means," confided Sarah Williams, the mayor's wife, as we shared coffee in her kitchen Saturday morning, "is that you need a husband. He thinks a single woman corrupts the children simply by existing." I nearly choked on my coffee. "That's ridiculous. I've been teaching these children for 15 years. Their parents trust me." "You know that, and I know that, but Blackwood has the territorial governor's ear. If he says close the school, it closes." Sarah's weathered face creased with worry. Maybe it's time you considered marriage, Maggie. Not for him, but for the children. There are good men in this territory who'd be honored to— No. The word came out sharper than I intended. I won't marry just to satisfy some bureaucrat's narrow ideas about propriety. If I marry, it will be because I've found a man I can respect, admire, and yes, love. Not because society demands it. But even as I spoke the words, my mind was already turning over a desperate plan. Sunday morning dawned crisp and clear, with the smell of wood smoke and autumn leaves drifting through my cabin windows. I dressed with unusual care, choosing my best dress, a deep burgundy wool that brought out the copper highlights in my hair, and taking time to arrange my locks in a softer style than my usual severe bun. The school building buzzed with more people than I'd seen in months. Word had spread about the new preacher, and families had come from homesteads 20 miles away to hear him speak. I watched from the back as Sam arranged his notes on my teaching desk, his massive frame making the room seem smaller than usual. When he began to preach, his voice filled every corner of the building without shouting, drawing us in with stories that made the scriptures come alive. He spoke of Moses as a man terrified of public speaking, of David as a shepherd boy who understood that sometimes the smallest among us carry the greatest courage, of Ruth, who chose loyalty over security, and found both love and purpose in a foreign land. Faith, he said, his eyes scanning the crowd, lingering for just a moment on my face, isn't about having all the answers. It's about taking the next step even when you can't see where the path leads. After the service, as families filed out into the golden September afternoon, I lingered, straightening books and erasing the blackboard with unnecessary thoroughness. When the last parishioner had gone, Sam began gathering his papers. "Reverend McKenna," I said, my heart pounding so hard I was certain he could hear it. "Might I speak with you privately?" He looked up, those forest green eyes holding mine. "Of course, Miss O'Brien." I walked to the windows, looking out at the rough buildings of Cedar Ridge, the mountains rising purple in the distance. How did a woman propose marriage to a man she'd known less than a week? How did she explain 20 years of loneliness without sounding pathetic? How did she offer her heart without revealing how desperately she needed someone to claim it? "The territorial administrator wants to close the school," I said finally, "unless I marry and provide what he calls proper moral guidance to the children." Sam's jaw tightened. "That's unconscionable. You're the finest teacher these children could hope for." "Thank you." I turned to face him, drawing strength from his obvious indignation on my behalf. "But the law gives him the power to do it. Which brings me to my proposition." I saw him stiffen slightly and rushed on before I lost my courage. "I need a husband. You need a place to establish your ministry and build your congregation. We could help each other." "Miss O'Brien." "Maggie," I interrupted. "If we're to discuss marriage, you should call me Maggie." He stood slowly, his height making me crane my neck to meet his gaze. "Maggie, then. You're talking about a marriage of convenience. I'm talking about a partnership." The words came easier now that I'd started. "I can offer you more than just a wife in name. I can keep books, organize the congregation, teach Sunday school. I can help you build something lasting here." I paused, then added quietly, "I've been alone for 20 years, Sam." "I know the difference between convenience and companionship. I'm offering both." He studied my face for a long moment, and I forced myself not to look away despite the heat burning in my cheeks. "What about love?" he asked softly. My breath caught. "What about it? Don't you want to marry for love?" The honest answer lodged in my throat. I was already half in love with him, had been since he'd smiled at me in Hutchinson's store. But admitting that would give him all the power in whatever arrangement we might make. "I want to marry a man I can respect and admire," I said instead. "A man who shares my values and won't try to diminish me. Love, well, perhaps love can grow from respect and shared purpose." Sam walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. In the golden afternoon light, he looked like a classical statue, all broad shoulders and noble profile. "I had a wife once," he said quietly. "Mary. She died 3 years ago in a cholera outbreak down in Colorado. We had 5 good years together." My heart clenched, both with sympathy and with a sharp stab of something that felt uncomfortably like jealousy. "I'm sorry. I swore I'd never marry again." told myself I was meant to wander, to serve wherever God called me. He turned back to me. But maybe God's calling me here. Maybe He's calling me to you. Hope fluttered in my chest like a caged bird. Is that a yes? It's a yes to partnership. A yes to helping you keep the school open and building a congregation together. His green eyes searched my face. But I need you to understand something, Maggie. I won't dishonor my first wife's memory by pretending this is the same thing. We can marry, we can work together, we can even care for each other. But I can't promise you the kind of love I gave Mary. The words stung, but I'd expected them. A man like Sam McKenna didn't fall in love with Spinster Schoolmarms in the space of a week. I understand, I said, though my heart was breaking a little. When? Soon. Before this administrator of yours has time to cause more trouble. Sam moved closer, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his gaze. Are you certain about this, Maggie? Once we speak vows, there's no going back. I thought of the children who depended on me, of the school that had been my life's work, of the years stretching ahead alone in my little cabin. Then I looked up into Sam's kind eyes and made my choice. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Then we'll be married Wednesday evening, if Pastor Morrison from Silver Creek can make the trip. A simple ceremony with just the basic vows. I nodded, not trusting my voice. 3 days to become Mrs. Samuel McKenna. 3 days to prepare for a marriage that might become everything I dreamed of or might remain forever a convenient arrangement. There's one more thing, Sam said, his voice dropping to that low rumble that did things to my pulse. If we do this, we do it properly. I won't have folks saying we're living in sin or that our marriage isn't real. We'll share a home, share a bed, share a life. Can you accept that? Heat flooded my cheeks, but I met his gaze steadily. Yes. Good. He gathered his papers with those big, gentle hands. I'll speak to Pastor Morrison tomorrow. And Maggie? Yes? Thank you for trusting me with this. After he left, I sank into one of the student desks, my legs suddenly unsteady. In 3 days, I would be a married woman. In 3 days, I would share a bed with the giant preacher who made my heart race and my good sense scatter like autumn leaves. I pressed my hands to my burning cheeks and tried to imagine what it would feel like to be claimed by a man like Samuel McKenna. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparations and second thoughts. Sarah Williams insisted on helping me sew a new dress for the ceremony, a deep blue wool that brought out my eyes and actually made me look almost pretty. The other women in town buzzed with excitement and barely concealed envy, whispering about how the Spinster Schoolmarm had managed to catch the handsome preacher. If only they knew the truth. Sam spent those days finishing the church roof with the other men, his presence on the construction site drawing curious glances and approving nods. I watched him sometimes through my classroom windows, marveling at how he moved despite his size, how the other men seemed to look to him naturally for guidance. Tuesday evening, he came to my cabin to discuss practical arrangements. I've been staying in the room behind the church, he said, accepting a cup of coffee and looking comically large in my small parlor. But it's not suitable for a married couple. Your place is nicer, but still just one room. We'll need something bigger if we're to make this work. There's the old Patterson place, I suggested. It's been empty since they moved back east. 3 rooms, a good well, and enough land for a garden. I'll look into buying it tomorrow. Sam set down his cup and fixed me with that steady green gaze. Maggie, about tomorrow night. My cheeks flamed, but I forced myself to meet his eyes. What about it? I want you to know that we don't have to. That is, we can take things slowly. Get to know each other as husband and wife without rushing into. He trailed off, color rising in his own face. Despite my nervousness, I almost smiled. For a man who could hold a congregation spellbound, he certainly struggled with delicate topics. Thank you, I said softly. That's very considerate. I mean it, Maggie. This arrangement shouldn't make you uncomfortable. We'll go at whatever pace feels right. I nodded, though part of me wondered if going slowly would make things easier or harder. Already, just being near him made me aware of things I'd never paid attention to before, the way his shirt stretched across his broad chest, the warmth that seemed to radiate from his skin, the gentle strength in those scarred hands. What would it be like to be touched by those hands? To be held against that massive chest. To be claimed and cherished by a man like Samuel McKenna. Wednesday evening arrived gray and drizzly, with autumn rain pattering against the school windows. Pastor Morrison had made the journey from Silver Creek, despite the weather, bringing his wife and daughter as witnesses. Mayor Williams and Sarah attended, along with a handful of other couples who'd become my friends over the years. I stood at the front of my own classroom in my new blue dress, my hair arranged in soft curls that Sarah had spent an hour perfecting. When Sam entered wearing his best black suit, his silver-streaked hair neatly combed and his green eyes serious, my breath caught in my throat. He looked like everything I'd ever dreamed of in a husband. The ceremony was simple, just as Sam had promised. We spoke the traditional vows in voices barely above whispers, his hands warm and steady as he slipped a simple gold band onto my finger. When Pastor Morrison pronounced us husband and wife and told Sam he could kiss his bride, those green eyes met mine with a question. I nodded slightly, and Sam bent his head to brush his lips against mine, soft, gentle, over almost before it began. But even that brief contact sent lightning through my veins and made my knees weak. "Mrs. McKenna," he said quietly, and I thought I saw something flicker in his eyes that hadn't been there before. "Reverend McKenna," I replied, and managed not to faint when he smiled. The Patterson place sat on a small rise overlooking Cedar Ridge, its log walls weathered silver by mountain winters and its windows dark with emptiness. Sam bought it for $40 and a promise to repair the church organ, then spent our first week of marriage making it habitable. I'd never lived with a man before, and everything about sharing space with Samuel McKenna was an education. He rose before dawn to pray and read his Bible by lamplight, his deep voice murmuring scripture in the gray morning quiet. He shaved with the same careful precision he brought to carpentry, standing shirtless at the washstand while I tried not to stare at the play of muscles across his broad back. The sleeping arrangements proved less awkward than I'd feared. Sam had fashioned a privacy screen from an old quilt, dividing our bedroom so we could dress and undress without embarrassment. At night, we lay in our separate beds, his specially built to accommodate his huge frame, and talked quietly about the day's events, our voices intimate in the darkness. "Tell me about your students," he said one evening as October rain drummed against the roof. I smiled, thinking of my dozen pupils ranging from 6-year-old Lucy Morrison to 15-year-old Jake Henderson, who was nearly as tall as I was. They're good children, mostly. Eager to learn when they're not distracted by the outside world. Lucy can already read better than some adults, and Jake has a real talent for mathematics. If I could just keep them in school long enough. What stops them? Life. The boys get pulled out to work the ranches and mines as soon as they're strong enough. The girls get married or needed at home to help with younger children. Sometimes I feel like I'm trying to hold back the tide with my bare hands. Sam was quiet for a moment. In Colorado, Mary and I started a school that met in the evenings, for the older children who had to work during the day. It wasn't perfect, but it helped. The mention of his first wife still stung, but I tried to keep my voice level. "That's a wonderful idea. Do you think it would work here? We could try. If you're willing." "We." The word warmed me more than it should have. I'm willing. Our daily routines settled into comfortable patterns. Sam spent mornings working on the church construction, afternoons visiting parishioners, and evenings helping me prepare lessons or working on household repairs. I taught school, managed our small home, and began organizing the women's auxiliary that would help support the congregation. It felt almost like a real marriage. The problem was Chester Blackwood. The territorial administrator had been conspicuously absent from our wedding, claiming urgent business in Helena. But he returned to Cedar Ridge 10 days later with a stranger in tow, a thin, pale man in expensive Eastern clothes who introduced himself as Inspector Theodore Marsh from the Territorial Education Commission. "Mrs. McKenna," Blackwood said, his smile oily as he stood in my classroom doorway that Friday afternoon. "How delightfully domestic you look now that you've acquired a husband. Inspector Marsh here has some concerns about the quality of education being provided in our little school." Marsh stepped forward, his cold gray eyes scanning my classroom with obvious disdain. "Mrs. McKenna, I've been reviewing the curriculum you've been teaching these children. Latin, Greek philosophy, advanced mathematics? Rather ambitious for a frontier school, don't you think?" "I believe in challenging my students, sir. Many of them are quite capable of getting above themselves," Blackwood interrupted. Inspector Marsh and I agree that frontier children need practical education. Basic reading and arithmetic, moral instruction and training in the domestic arts for girls and manual trades for boys. This classical nonsense fills their heads with unsuitable ideas. My temper flared. Unsuitable ideas like thinking for themselves? Precisely. Marsh made a note in his leather portfolio. I'll be conducting a formal evaluation of your teaching methods next week. If I find them unsuitable for the needs of this community, I'll recommend that you be replaced with a more appropriate instructor. And I know just the person. Blackwood added with a smirk. My niece, Miss Penelope Blackwood, recently graduated from a very proper finishing school back east. She's looking for a position where she can instill correct values in impressionable young minds. They left me standing there, fury and fear warring in my chest. 15 years of work, and they wanted to replace me with some pampered Eastern girl who probably couldn't tell the difference between a sickle and a scythe. That evening, I paced our small parlor like a caged animal, while Sam listened to my tirade. They can't do this, I said for the 10th time. The parents chose me. The children trust me. I've given my life to this school. Easy, darling. Sam caught my hands as I swept past his chair, pulling me to a stop. The endearment slipped out naturally, and I felt my heart skip despite my agitation. We'll figure this out. How? Blackwood has political connections. This inspector is clearly in his pocket. Even if the parents object, they can override local wishes. I sank into the chair across from his, suddenly exhausted. Maybe I should just accept defeat, find some other way to be useful. No. Sam's voice carried a note of steel I'd never heard before. You're the finest teacher these children could hope for. I won't let some corrupt politician destroy your life's work. What choice do we have? Sam was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes thoughtful. Tell me about Blackwood. How did he get his position? Political appointment. The territorial governor owed some favor to his family back east. I frowned, trying to remember details. Why? Just thinking. Sam stood and moved to the window, his massive frame silhouetted against the lamplight. Political appointees can be unappointed if the right pressure is applied. What do you know about his business dealings? Not much. He spends a lot of time in Helena, claims to be working on territorial development projects. Why? Men like Blackwood don't usually limit themselves to official corruption. They get greedy. Sam turned back to me. I think I'll have a talk with Mayor Williams tomorrow. See what he knows about our territorial administrator's extracurricular activities. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. I was hanging laundry behind our cabin when I heard horses approaching. 3 men in dusty trail clothes dismounted near our front door, their faces hard and their guns worn with use. Mrs. McKenna? The leader, a grizzled man with silver whiskers and cold blue eyes, touched his hat brim mockingly. Name's Pike. We're here to see your husband about his preaching. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. He's not here. He's working on the church. Maybe you can give him a message then. Pike stepped closer, and I caught the smell of whiskey and unwashed clothes. Tell the good reverend that some folks don't appreciate his sermons. All that talk about justice and protecting the weak. It's giving people ideas they shouldn't have. I beg your pardon? Simple message, ma'am. The reverend should stick to saving souls and leave worldly matters to those better equipped to handle them. Wouldn't want anything unfortunate to happen to such a nice little family. The threat was unmistakable. I lifted my chin, channeling every ounce of schoolmarm authority I possessed. You're on private property, gentlemen. I suggest you leave. Pike smiled, showing tobacco-stained teeth. Yes, ma'am. But you remember what I said. Wouldn't want the reverend to have an accident. Or his pretty little wife either. They rode off in a cloud of dust, leaving me shaking with a combination of fear and fury. By the time Sam returned for dinner, I'd worked myself into a state. They threatened us, I said without preamble as he walked through the door. 3 men with guns, warning you to stop preaching about justice. Sam's face went very still. Describe them. I did, watching his expression grow grimmer with each detail. When I finished, he sank into his chair and rubbed his face with both hands. I was afraid this might happen, he said quietly. You were afraid what might happen. Sam, who were those men? Hired guns. The kind men like Blackwood use when they want to send a message without getting their own hands dirty. Sam looked up at me, his green eyes troubled. Maggie, I need to tell you something about why I really came to Cedar Ridge. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? I didn't just wander into town looking for a place to establish a ministry. I came here looking for information about territorial land fraud, illegal mining claims, and political corruption that reaches all the way to Helena. I stared at him. You're some kind of investigator? Not officially. But I have friends in Denver who work for the federal marshals. They asked me to look into some irregularities in territorial administration. Men like Blackwood getting rich while homesteaders lose their land to legal technicalities. And you used our marriage as cover. The words came out flat, emotionless. Sam flinched. Not entirely. Maggie, I swear to you, when I agreed to marry you, it was because I wanted to help you keep the school. The investigation was secondary. Was it? I stood, moving toward the window so he couldn't see my face.
How convenient that the Spinster Schoolmarm needed a husband. Perfect cover for a federal spy.
It wasn't like that, wasn't it? I turned to face him, proud of how steady my voice sounded. Tell me, Sam, if you hadn't needed cover for your investigation, would you still have married me?
The long pause before he answered told me everything I needed to know.
I don't know, he said finally. But Maggie, whatever my reasons for coming here, what's between us is real. This marriage, this partnership, is built on lies. I moved toward the bedroom, needing to get away before I said something I'd regret. I'm going to bed. We can discuss this in the morning. Maggie, please. Good night, Reverend McKenna. I lay awake for hours that night, listening to Sam move restlessly in his bed across the room. My husband, if he really was, that was a federal spy using our marriage for cover. The men who'd threatened me were probably connected to whatever corruption he was investigating, and I was caught in the middle, a convenient prop in someone else's drama. But even as hurt and anger churned in my stomach, I couldn't ignore the fact that Sam had tried to warn me, that he'd looked genuinely stricken when I'd confronted him, that whatever his original motivations, he'd been nothing but kind and respectful since our wedding. Sunday's service was tense. Sam preached about truth and justice with his usual passion, but I could see the strain around his eyes. Several of our regular parishioners were missing, and those who came seemed nervous, glancing toward the door as if expecting trouble. It came during the closing hymn. The church doors burst open, and Pike walked in with his two companions, their boots loud against the wooden floor. Conversations died mid-sentence as 30 pairs of eyes turned toward the intruders. "Sorry to interrupt, Reverend," Pike called out, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. "But we need to have that talk I mentioned." Sam stepped down from the pulpit, his movements calm and deliberate. "Services aren't finished, gentlemen. You're welcome to wait outside." "Oh, we'll wait right here." Pike settled into a back pew, his hand resting meaningfully on his gun. "Don't mind us. Continue with your sermon." The next few minutes were excruciating. Sam tried to finish the service normally, but fear hung in the air like smoke. Parents gathered their children closer. Men shifted uncomfortably, their own hands moving toward their weapons. When Sam finally dismissed the congregation, families filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact with the gunmen. Within minutes, the church was empty, except for Sam, myself, and Pike's men. "Now then, Reverend," Pike said, standing with lazy menace. "Let's have that talk." "My wife doesn't need to hear this," Sam said quietly. "Oh, but she does." Pike smiled that cold smile. "See, this concerns her too. All that teaching about reading and writing and thinking for themselves. Some folks think that's dangerous, especially for women." My blood turned to ice. They weren't just after Sam. They were after me too. "What do you want?" Sam asked. "Simple. You preach about salvation and leave worldly matters alone. Your wife teaches basic reading and arithmetic, nothing fancy. And both of you stop asking questions about things that don't concern you." Pike stepped closer. "Do that, and everybody stays healthy and happy." "And if we don't?" Pike's smile widened. "Well, accidents happen, Reverend, especially to folks who don't listen to good advice." That's when Sam did something that made my heart stop. He laughed. It started as a low chuckle and built into rich, genuine amusement that echoed off the church walls. Pike's confidence faltered, his hand moving toward his gun. "Something funny, preacher?" "Just thinking," Sam said, his voice still warm with humor. "You boys come into God's house, threaten his servants, and think you're in control." He took a step forward, and suddenly the atmosphere in the room shifted. "But you made one mistake." "What's that?" "You threatened my wife." The change in Sam was terrifying and magnificent. The gentle preacher disappeared, replaced by something primal and dangerous. His green eyes went cold as winter ice, and his massive frame seemed to fill the entire space. Pike's hand was halfway to his gun when Sam moved. I'd never seen a man Sam's size move so fast. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next he had Pike by the throat, lifting him clear off the ground with one hand. The other two gunmen went for their weapons, but Sam was already moving, using Pike's body as a shield while his free hand found the rifle Pike's companion was trying to draw. The fight was over in seconds. Pike lay unconscious on the church floor, one of his men was groaning and clutching a broken wrist, and the third was staring down the barrel of his own rifle, now in Sam's massive hands. "Here's some good advice," Sam said, his voice deadly calm. "Anyone who threatens my wife answers to me. And trust me, gentlemen, that's not a conversation you want to have." He helped the conscious gunman lift his unconscious boss, then escorted all three of them to the door.
"Tell whoever sent you that Samuel McKenna doesn't scare easily, and neither does his wife."
After they'd ridden away, Sam turned to me, concern replacing the cold fury in his eyes. "Are you all right?" I was trembling, but not from fear. Watching my gentle giant husband transform into an avenging angel had awakened something primal in me. This was what it felt like to be protected, to be claimed, to belong to a man who would fight the world to keep me safe. "I'm fine. I managed." "Sam, what you just did, I'm sorry you had to see that. Violence in God's house. Don't apologize." I stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "You protected me, protected us. Always," he said quietly. "Whatever else is between us, Maggie, I'll always protect you. Even though our marriage is just for convenience." Something flickered in those green eyes. "Is it?" The question hung in the air between us, loaded with possibility. I thought about the past 2 weeks, the quiet intimacy of shared mornings and whispered conversations in the dark. The way my pulse raced when he smiled at me. The way he'd said my wife just now like he meant it. "I don't know," I whispered. "Neither do I." Sam reached up to touch my cheek, his scarred hand gentle against my skin. "But I know that when they threatened you, something in me went cold. The thought of anyone hurting you. Sam, I know I haven't been completely honest with you. About why I came here, about the investigation. But this," he gestured between us, "this is real. Whatever else happens, you need to know that." I searched his eyes, looking for deception and finding only sincerity. "What happens now, with Blackwood, with the men who threatened us?" "Now we fight back." Sam's jaw tightened with determination. "I've been gathering evidence quietly, but after today, there's no point in being subtle. It's time to bring in the federal marshals and end this corruption once and for all." "What about the school? What about Marsh's evaluation?" "We'll face that when it comes. Together." Sam's hand moved to cup the back of my neck, his thumb brushing along my jawline. "If you'll have me." Not as a marriage of convenience, but as a true partner. My heart hammered against my ribs. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that somewhere in the past 2 weeks, I stopped thinking of you as a convenient arrangement and started thinking of you as my wife. My real wife." His voice dropped to that low rumble that made my knees weak. "I'm saying that I want to make this marriage everything it could be, if you're willing." "Sam, I know I can't offer you the same kind of love I gave Mary. That was a different time, a different man. But I can offer you everything I am now. My protection, my respect, my partnership, and my heart, if you'll take it." I stared up into his face, this gentle giant who'd become so much more than I dared to hope for.
"What about your investigation? The danger?"
"We'll face it together. Everything together." His thumb traced along my lower lip. "What do you say, Mrs. McKenna? Ready to make this marriage real?" Instead of answering with words, I rose on my tiptoes and kissed him. This wasn't the gentle brush of lips we'd shared at our wedding. This was heat and hunger, and 2 weeks of suppressed longing finally set free. Sam's arms came around me, lifting me against his chest as his mouth claimed mine with a thoroughness that made my head spin. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Sam rested his forehead against mine. "Is that a yes?" he asked, his voice rough. "That's a yes to everything," I whispered. "Partnership, marriage, facing whatever comes next, all of it." "Good," he said, and kissed me again. "Because I have a feeling things are about to get very interesting around here." The federal marshals arrived on Tuesday's morning train like avenging angels in dusty coats and worn boots. Marshal James Fletcher, a weathered man with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, shook Sam's hand with the familiarity of old friendship. "Sam, you son of a gun," he said, grinning. "When Denver told me you'd gotten married and settled down, I thought they were pulling my leg. But here you are, looking domestic as a house cat." "Domestic, maybe. Settled, we'll see." Sam's arm tightened around my waist as we stood on our front porch. "Jim, I'd like you to meet my wife, Margaret. Maggie, this is Marshal Fletcher. We served together in the war." Marshal Fletcher touched his hat brim respectfully. "Mrs. McKenna, your husband's told me you're the finest teacher in Montana Territory." "He's biased," I said, but warmth spread through my chest at Sam's praise. "Maybe so, but the evidence says otherwise." Fletcher's expression grew serious. "We've been investigating the territorial corruption your husband uncovered. What we found goes deeper than anyone imagined. Blackwood's been selling homestead claims to Eastern investors while the legal owners are still living on the land. When the investors show up to claim their property, the families get forced off at gunpoint." My stomach clenched. "How many families?" "At least 30 that we know of. Maybe more." Fletcher pulled a leather portfolio from his saddlebags. "We have documentation of illegal mining claims, forged land patents, and bribes paid to territorial officials. Enough to put Blackwood and his associates in federal prison for a very long time." "What about the school evaluation?" I asked. "Blackwood's brought in an inspector to replace me with his niece." Fletcher's weathered face creased with what might have been a smile. "Mrs. McKenna, I have a feeling Inspector Marsh is going to find himself too busy with federal charges to worry about school inspections." That afternoon, we watched from our window as Marshal Fletcher and his men arrested Chester Blackwood outside the territorial office. The corrupt administrator's face went white as parchment when Fletcher read the federal charges, his oily confidence evaporating like morning mist. "Fraud, extortion, conspiracy, and violation of the Homestead Act," Fletcher's voice carried clearly across the dusty street. "Chester Blackwood, you're under arrest by authority of the federal government." Inspector Marsh lasted exactly 10 minutes before confessing everything and begging for leniency. Turned out he wasn't even a real inspector, just Blackwood's cousin from Philadelphia, paid to play a role and legitimize the replacement of unsuitable teachers with more pliable candidates. By Thursday, Cedar Ridge was buzzing with the news. The territorial governor had appointed an interim administrator pending federal investigation of the entire department. 3 more officials had been arrested in Helena, and the families who'd lost their homesteads were getting their land back. "It's over," I said that evening as Sam and I sat on our front porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains purple and gold. "The school is safe. For now." Sam's arm tightened around me where I sat curled against his side. "But we'll face whatever comes next, together." That word "together" still sent shivers through me. The past week had transformed our marriage from convenient arrangement to something deeper, more real than I'd dared hope. Sam had moved his things to my side of the bedroom, and though we'd been taking things slowly, the promise of complete union hung between us like a sweet tension. "The church will be finished next week," Sam said, his deep voice rumbling against my ear. "We'll have our first service in the new building Sunday. Your congregation has grown. Word of what you did to Pike and his men has spread. Half the territory thinks you're some kind of avenging angel." Sam chuckled. "God works in mysterious ways, though I'm not sure fighting in church was exactly what he had in mind. You were protecting your flock and your wife." I tilted my head to look up at him. "I've never felt so safe as I did watching you face down those gunmen. You shouldn't have had to see that." "Yes, I should have. I needed to see the man I married, all of him, the gentle preacher and the fierce protector. I traced patterns on his broad chest through his shirt. I love both sides of you, Sam. His hand stilled where it had been stroking my hair. Maggie, I know you can't say it back. Not yet. Your heart is still healing from losing Mary. I sat up to face him fully. But I need you to know how I feel. I love you, Samuel McKenna. Not just as my convenient husband or my protector, but as the man who reads to me from Psalms while I cook breakfast, who listens to my students' problems like they matter, who holds me when I have nightmares about those gunmen. Sam's green eyes searched my face in the fading light. You deserve a man who can love you completely, without reservations. I have one. Love isn't a limited resource, Sam. It doesn't run out when you give it to someone new. The love you gave Mary doesn't diminish what you could give me. They're different loves for different women at different times in your life. When did you get so wise? When I fell in love with a wandering preacher who thought his heart was too broken to love again. I leaned forward to kiss him softly. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. Promise me something, Sam said, his voice rough with emotion. What? Promise me that if something happens to me, nothing's going to happen to you. Promise me, he insisted. If something happens, you won't close your heart. You won't spend the rest of your life alone, thinking love only comes once. Tears stung my eyes. Sam, promise me, Maggie. I couldn't bear thinking of you alone and bitter, convinced that loving me ruined you for anyone else. I promise, I whispered, though the words felt like glass in my throat. But only if you promise me the same thing. What do you mean? Promise me you'll let yourself love me. Not just care for me or protect me, but love me. Mary wouldn't want you to spend your life half alive out of loyalty to her memory. Sam was quiet for so long, I thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. She told me that, right before she died. Made me promise not to become one of those widowers who treats their wife's memory like a shrine. He touched my cheek with his scarred hand. She said love was meant to be shared, not hoarded. Smart woman. Yes, she was. And she would have liked you. Sam's thumb traced along my jaw. Maggie, I can't promise that loving you will be easy for me. I've spent 3 years building walls around my heart. Then we'll tear them down together, stone by stone, if we have to. You make it sound simple. It is simple, not easy, but simple. I covered his hand with mine. You just have to decide to try. Friday brought unexpected visitors, good ones this time. Sarah Williams knocked on our door with a basket of fresh bread and a grin that could have lit up the whole territory. Federal marshals aren't the only ones who've been busy, she announced, settling into our parlor like a general planning a campaign. The Women's Auxiliary has been organizing, and we have a proposal. What kind of proposal? I asked, pouring coffee. The kind that involves a real wedding celebration for you and Sam. The whole community wants to throw you a proper reception. Music, dancing, food, the works. Sarah's eyes sparkled with mischief. After all, your first wedding was a bit rushed. And after everything you've both done for this town, we want to celebrate properly. I felt heat creep up my neck. Sarah, that's very kind. But we don't need... Of course you need it. Every bride deserves a proper celebration. She turned to Sam. Don't you agree, Reverend? Sam's eyes met mine, and I saw something warm and wonderful in their green depths. If Maggie wants a celebration, she should have one. It's not about what I want. Yes, it is. Sam's voice held a note of gentle command. You've spent 15 years putting everyone else's needs first. Let the community celebrate you for once. So Saturday evening found me in my parlor again, this time wearing a new dress of emerald silk that Sarah had somehow procured from Helena. My hair was arranged in an elaborate style with tiny white flowers, and I felt more beautiful than I ever had in my life. The celebration was held in the new church, its fresh pine walls glowing warm in the lamplight. Someone had found a fiddle player, and couples were dancing to lively tunes while children ran between the grown-ups and women laid out tables groaning with food. Mrs. McKenna, Mayor Williams said, raising his glass of cider, a toast to the finest teacher Montana Territory has ever seen, and to the man lucky enough to call her wife. To Sam and Maggie, the crowd chorused, and I felt tears prick my eyes. But the most magical moment came when the fiddle player struck up a slow waltz and Sam held out his hand to me. "Dance with me, Mrs. McKenna?" I'd never danced with a man his size before. Sam had to bend nearly in half to hold me properly, but somehow we found our rhythm, moving together across the church floor while the community we'd both served watched with approving smiles. "Happy?" Sam asked, his voice low in my ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible." "Good. You deserve happiness, Maggie. You deserve everything good life has to offer." As we spun slowly in the lamplight, surrounded by friends and neighbors, I felt something settle deep in my chest. This was what belonging felt like. This was what it meant to be claimed and cherished. Later that night, after the last guest had gone home and we'd cleaned up the church, Sam and I walked back to our cabin under a sky brilliant with stars. "Thank you," I said as we reached our front porch. "For what?" "For giving me a real wedding celebration, for letting the community show their love for us, for making me feel like a bride instead of just a convenient arrangement." Sam stopped walking and turned to face me, his hands gentle on my waist. "Maggie, you haven't been a convenient arrangement since our 3rd day of marriage. Maybe not even then. What have I been? Everything I didn't know I needed." His voice was rough with emotion. "A partner, a friend, a woman who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be." He paused, searching my face in the starlight. "The love of my life." My breath caught. "Sam, I love you, Maggie McKenna. I love your fierce intelligence and your stubborn determination. I love the way you stand up to bullies and the way you gentleness with your students. I love how you make our little cabin feel like a home." His thumbs traced along my cheekbones. "I love you completely, without reservations, without comparing you to anyone else. You're not my second chance at love, you're my first chance at this love." The love between Samuel McKenna and Margaret O'Brien McKenna. Tears spilled down my cheeks as 20 years of loneliness finally, completely, ended. "I love you too," I whispered. "So much that sometimes I can't breathe from the wonder of it." When Sam kissed me this time, it was with the passion of a man who'd finally let down all his walls. His arms lifted me against his chest, and I wrapped my legs around his waist as he carried me into our home, into our bedroom, into the complete union we'd both been waiting for. "Are you sure?" he asked, setting me gently on my feet beside our bed. Instead of answering with words, I began unbuttoning his shirt, my fingers trembling slightly with anticipation and love. Sam's hands covered mine, stilling them. "Maggie, once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely, and I'll be yours. I've been yours since the day you agreed to marry me," I said softly. "This just makes it official." What happened next was beautiful and tender and passionate beyond anything I'd imagined in my spinster dreams. Sam loved me with the same gentle thoroughness he brought to everything else, patient, careful, ensuring my pleasure before his own. When we finally came together completely, I understood why the Bible called it becoming one flesh. We weren't just two people sharing physical intimacy, we were two souls recognizing their perfect match. Afterward, I lay in Sam's arms, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. "No regrets?" he asked, his voice sleepy and satisfied. "Only that we waited so long." Sam chuckled, his chest rumbling under my cheek. "Good things are worth waiting for. Even 20-year-old spinster schoolmarms? Especially 20-year-old spinster schoolmarms, though you're 36, not 20. I pinched his side. "Beast. You're beast." "Yes," I agreed, smiling against his skin. "Mine." Sunday morning dawned bright and clear, with the kind of crisp autumn air that made everything seem possible. We held the first service in our new church, and I'd never seen Sam more radiant as he stood behind the pulpit he'd crafted with his own hands. "Today," he said, his voice carrying easily through the space, "we dedicate not just this building, but our commitment to each other and to this community. We've faced challenges together, corruption, threats, attempts to divide us. But we've stood firm because we know that when good people support each other, evil cannot triumph." His eyes found mine in the congregation, and his smile was like sunrise. The book of Ecclesiastes tells us that two are better than one, because they have a good return for their labor. If either falls down, one can help the other up. And though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken. As he spoke about partnership and mutual support, I thought about our own cord of 3 strands, Sam, myself, and the community we serve together, strong enough to withstand whatever challenges the future might bring. After the service, as families gathered outside to enjoy the perfect autumn day, little Lucy Morrison tugged on my skirt. "Mrs. McKenna, are you really married now? Like, really, really married?" I glanced at Sam, who was talking with the men about winter preparations but keeping one eye on me. When our gazes met, the heat in his green eyes made my cheeks flush. "Yes, Lucy, really, really married." "Good," the 6-year-old said solemnly. "Reverend McKenna looks much happier now. Mama says it's because he found his person." "His person?" "You know, the person who makes you complete." Lucy skipped away before I could respond, but her innocent words echoed in my heart. "His person. Yes, that's exactly what I was. And he was mine." That evening, as we sat on our porch, watching the sun set behind the mountains, Sam's arm around me and my head on his shoulder, I marveled at how completely my life had changed. 6 months ago, I'd been a lonely spinster facing the loss of everything I'd worked for. Now, I was a cherished wife, a protected woman, a partner in both marriage and ministry. The school was safe, the corruption had been rooted out, and our community was stronger than ever. "What are you thinking about?" Sam asked, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Just everything. How different my life is now. Better, different, or worse, different." I turned to look up at him, this gentle giant who'd claimed my heart so completely. "The best different, though I do have one complaint." "What's that?" "You never did build me that bookshelf you promised." Sam threw back his head and laughed, the sound rich and joyful. "Mrs. McKenna, I promise you that bookshelf will be the first thing I build for our new house." "New house? Well, we'll need something bigger soon enough." Sam's hand moved to rest on my still flat stomach, his eyes warm with possibility. "Can't raise a family in a one-room cabin." My breath caught. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" "I'm saying that I'd like to give you everything you've ever dreamed of, Maggie McKenna. A real home, children to love and raise, a partnership that lasts the rest of our lives." His voice dropped to that low rumble that never failed to make my pulse race. "What do you say? Ready to build something permanent with me?" Instead of answering with words, I kissed my husband with all the love in my overflowing heart. Around us, the Montana wilderness stretched vast and wild, full of challenges and possibilities. But I wasn't afraid. Whatever the future held, we'd face it together, the wandering preacher who'd found his calling and the spinster schoolmarm who'd finally been claimed by the love of her life. As Sam deepened our kiss and the stars began to appear overhead, I knew with absolute certainty that I'd been waiting 20 years for exactly this moment, exactly this man, exactly this love. And it had been worth every lonely day to arrive here. In Samuel McKenna's arms, completely and irrevocably home.